listening to Grounded. Grounded? What's that? I'm grounded in Jesus. LLA.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Grounded Stories, a storytelling podcast created for our SECC education community. We hope that Grounded Stories will be a resource to provide a little fun and laughter, and of course, encouragement to stay grounded in Jesus in the ever-changing world that we live in. We're here because we believe that spiritual connection doesn't have to stop while we're all quarantined in our homes. In fact, it just means that we have to be a little more creative about how we connect with each other. Last week, we addressed the difficult topic of death and grief, why people die, what God did about it, and what we can do to help those who are grieving. This week, it's our final Grounded Stories episode of the season. This will be our 10th episode since the Grounded podcast took a fun and quirky turn from its traditional core value interview style into the zany lives of Linz and Clay. It's been a great season, and my wife Lindsay and I have had tons of fun creating this show for you. Just as we couldn't have predicted the start of this show, we don't know if these shows will continue in the future with the start of the school year. We'll just have to play it by ear, I guess. So, for this final Grounded Stories episode, we wanted to do a little reflection, looking back at the season and taking time to remember the lessons we've learned and how God has led us. Listen in as that reflection starts for Linz. Linz, what are you doing? Are my eyes misleading me? It looks like you're reading an instruction manual? You never read instruction manuals.
Of course I'm not reading an instruction manual. These are my plans for my Guinness Book of World Record-breaking domino run, of course.
You mean like the one that I destroyed just last week? Like the one that took us 3 whole days to clean up since it literally was all over our house? That domino run?
Exactly. Don't worry, I'm not ready to start making it again. Well, not yet at least. But I was just looking over my plans again, and it really was a beautiful domino run. I was just thinking about how thankful I am that I actually wrote my plans down so that I won't forget them if I ever get the motivation to start it again.
That's so true. Let me take a look at those. Wow, you sure make good plans. I had no idea that you had these. Do you have plans for all of your projects?
Yep, right here in this super duper project builder bullet journal of mine. And this one is only since quarantine started. If you look in this closet, you'll see that there are super duper project builder bullet journals cataloged here using the Dewey Decimal System.
Wow, it's almost full from the floor to the ceiling.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to digitize them soon. Sometimes I like to just look through and remember what I've done.
What are some of your favorites?
I thought you'd never ask. Introducing Linz's Top 5. Starting with number 5, the Parachute of Science. So parachuters use large fabric parachutes to glide safely to the ground. I wonder if it matters how large the parachute is compared to the object that it's holding. Alright, test 1. Safely dropping an egg with my homemade bedsheet parachute of science. Maybe it was just a frail eggshell. Or perhaps, maybe the angle was just a little off. Let's try another item. Test number 2. My pillow. Here goes nothing. Awesome! So the parachute can hold larger items. Okay. Test number 3.
Where's our bedsheet? I know I put it in the dryer, and now it's gone. Linz, what in the world are you doing with our couch on the top of the tree attached to our bedsheet?
Test number 3, commencing now. Not my proudest moment, but we all did learn an important lesson that day.
Exactly. We all learned that I'm in charge of laundry from now on.
Yes, he fell for it.
That made the top 5? as I recall, it didn't actually work.
That made the top 5 not because the parachute actually helped things glide safely to the ground, but it did work wonders in decreasing the amount of laundry I have to do.
What? How did you... You mean that...
Moving on to number 4. My state-of-the-art, newly repurposed social distancing laser taser radar 2020 edition.
Hey, Linz, I have the taboo game here, but there's something missing. I can't find the buzzer.
The what?
The buzzer!
I can't hear you. I don't even know how he expects me to hear him when he's yelling from the other side of the house.
I can't find the... Oh, there's the buzzer. Why are you buzzing me? We're not even playing yet.
Oh, you mean my state-of-the-art, newly repurposed social distancing laser taser radar 2020 edition?
Your what? I'm not sure what quarantine has done to you, but it looks like that's a taboo buzzer. Give me that.
Hey, step back. This radar has been programmed to buzz anytime someone gets closer than 7 feet away from me.
I thought that social distancing was supposed to be no closer than 6 feet.
Exactly. 1 foot for extra caution.
Linz, you know that social distancing does not apply to family members. It's for like going out of the house or something. So please, don't get too buzzer happy. I'm not going anywhere for a long time.
Fair enough.
I still feel like that was just the taboo buzzer, with you pressing it when I walked too close.
Hey, remember this is Linz's top 5, not Clay's top 5. You can't top safety in the world we live in.
Okay then. So what's number 3?
For number 3, I'll let you guess. It involves 4 very high-quality classical musical instruments that must be played with a combination of instrument and the human voice. Just spectacular instruments.
I don't think I've ever heard you creating anything with high-quality classical musical instruments. The only instruments I've heard you play with are the...
Yep.
No.
And hit it. Yay! No appreciation for the arts. You have no culture.
Well, I did have some yogurt this morning, and it has live active cultures in it.
I rest my case. And that leads me to number 2, my electronic customizable variable hourglass sand timer. I made one of those hourglass timer thingies.
You mean those ones that are shaped kind of like the number 8 with 2 different parts? The top part has sand in it, and then it slowly drops through the little space between the top and bottom half until all of the sand has reached the bottom.
Wow, you're really good at explaining things. Did you just look that up in the dictionary?
Well, I guess that's what happens when I read instruction manuals for my leisure reading.
Interesting. To each his own. Well, that's what normal hourglass timers are like. But the one I'm making is an electronic, customizable, variable version of that outdated one that was created in the 8th century. Take a look at this baby.
Wowzers, that looks amazing. But how does it work?
I thought you'd never ask. This remote can control how wide the neck of the hourglass is. When I press this button, the neck will expand and get wider, or contract and get smaller and allow sand to go through either faster or slower depending on the amount of time I set it for. I can program it to be 30 seconds, 30 minutes, or 30 hours, or anything in between.
But isn't it kind of hard to know when it's done? It doesn't beep or anything like normal timers nowadays.
That's why I programmed the sand to spin this electromagnetic turbine that generates electricity to run this music player. And the best part about it is depending on how fast the sand turns the turbine, the music will play either slower or faster. Let me show you how it works. this will be, let me set it here. This is for a 30-second timer. And this is what it sounds like if I set it for 24 and let's say 24 and a half minutes.
I have to say that was one of my favorites. Once the ultra-fine sand finally arrived, I loved dancing around to the music made by the sand-powered electromagnetic turbine. And once we actually had a functioning timer, your Snickerpoodle cookies were amazing.
Oh, why thank you. But my all-time favorite project was the domino run to demolish all previous domino run records in all history. It was so promising until a stroke of bad fate and the unstoppable, devastating destruction that followed.
Linz, I've said it like 1,000,000 times. I'm so sorry. I thought you said we were all good and you had moved on, like it was water under the bridge.
It was more like a flash flood that destroyed the bridge. But you're right. I'm over it. Now on to my next project.
Wait a minute. I'm still amazed by your super duper project builder bullet journals. I never even knew that you had such records of your plans. What made you start all of this?
Well, you see, when I was little, I made my very first project. It was a 15-story tall dollhouse made of shoeboxes.
Yes, I finished my 15-story shoebox dollhouse. 3 months of hard work designing all the wallpaper, furniture, toys, and even the little tiny decorations. Okay, Bowser, do you want to play in the dollhouse? Yes, Lynn. I'd love to play in the dollhouse.
It was absolutely perfect, and I loved playing with it for the first 5 minutes until my brother drove his remote control monster truck into it, and the tires shredded it to pieces. I didn't have any plans or blueprints drawn out, and I couldn't remember how to rebuild it. From that day onward, I vowed to always keep good plans so that I would never, ever forget the plans I had made in case I ever needed them in the future.
Wow.
I know, he was such a terribly mean brother.
No, yes, he was mean. Well, I was saying wow because it's amazing how well what you just said fits what I just read in Deuteronomy this morning.
What? How does an epic dollhouse destroying monster truck controlled by a very insensitive older brother relate to anything in Deuteronomy?
Well, not like that. Well, let me just tell you the story. You remember when this whole COVID pandemic started? We were grocery shopping on a Friday afternoon.
Oh yes, to create my epic sushi stacks if I recall.
Yes, but what I was actually referring to was the Bible story that we talked about relating to the Israelites leaving Egypt.
Oh yeah, God did all those plagues until Pharaoh let them leave Egypt.
And then God provided for them to have manna each day. Quail and water, the list goes on. God provided so many miracles for them. He even parted the Red Sea so that they could walk across dry ground.
So did they ever make it to the Promised Land?
Well, yes. More than 40 years later, they were actually standing just outside the land of Canaan. And that's the part of the story I was reading today in Deuteronomy chapter 8. The people were so excited about going into the Promised Land, but before they could get inside, Moses gave them a few important instructions. He reminded them of how God had provided manna for them and how none of their clothes had worn out for the whole 40 years.
What? Were they made with steel fibers or something? I need to get my hands on this fabric.
No, it was just another example of how God provided for them. He also made it so that their feet didn't get injured, though they had to walk so much. There were so many ways that God provided for them. During those 40 years, they had to trust him. They had no other choice. If God didn't provide for them in the desert, they would have all died. But now, they were about to enter into the Promised Land, a land with brooks and streams and deep springs gushing out into the valleys and hills. A land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil and honey. A land where bread would not be scarce and they would lack nothing. A land where the rocks were iron and they could dig copper straight out of the hills.
Wow! That must have sounded a little like heaven to them, especially after they had been traveling through the desert for so many decades.
Yes, and that's why Moses gave them this warning. When they enter the promised land, they would have so many blessings, they would not have to trust God as much as they did in the desert. It would be easy for them to forget that all of it was from God. They might instead think that it was their own strength or their wisdom or hard work that had brought them this far, and forget that it was all because of God's blessing, and that it was all for them to fulfill God's plans for their future.
I don't understand how anyone could forget God's plans when they had experienced so many amazing blessings.
Well, it does seem hard to believe, but all of us tend to forget unless we really reflect or look back at what God has done for us. Reflecting on what God has done for us doesn't actually come naturally. We have to stop and think about it and do it on purpose. This is what made me think about it when you were showing me your super duper project builder bullet journal. After spending so much time creating your projects, you might think you would never forget how you made them and all the details. But you did. So you realize you had to create your super duper project builder bullet journals to remember your plans. Writing things down is actually one way to reflect on them.
I never thought about it in that way. So what did the Israelites do to make sure they would never forget God's blessings in their lives?
God gave them clear laws and instructions, and even celebrations for them to always remember that He was their God. Moses wrote these down into books, kind of like what you did. But back then, they couldn't print a book for each family to have that had all of God's words in them, like our Bibles. So instead, God asks them to put His words into their hearts, or to memorize them, to teach them to their kids, to talk about them when they were sitting at home or walking out and about, when they were going to bed and when they were getting up. He asked them to tie them as symbols on their hands and on their foreheads, and to write them on the door frames and gates of their houses.
So what you're saying is that they were basically supposed to talk about what God did for them as much as possible so they wouldn't forget.
Exactly, or exactly as you might say.
Aww, I'm rubbing off on you, Clay. You know, I've been doing this sort of recording and reflection on my project since I was little. I guess I should be doing this kind of reflection about what God has done for me as well, so I don't forget and start taking things for granted. I mean, God sure has done a lot for us and has taught us so many things, especially throughout this quarantine time.
Yeah, our time is a little similar to Moses' time in that we have been in a big waiting period. Not 40 days and 40 nights like Noah and the flood, and definitely not 40 years like the Israelites, but we've been in this waiting period, and God has been teaching us a lot too. Now, there's talk about things opening up very soon, like churches and restaurants and maybe even schools at some point. It'll be so easy to forget all the ways that God has blessed us and the lessons that we've learned if we don't reflect on them.
Yeah, but how can we do that?
Well, there are many ways to reflect on things. We could write them down in a super duper quarantine bullet journal.
I see what you did there.
I'm sure we could write them down somewhere. Or we could just talk about them to each other often. And we could even make little reminders around our house so that whenever we see them, we will remember what a great God we have.
Like what kind of reminders would you suggest?
Well, some people write Bible verses or quotes or drawings on colorful post-it notes and stick them on common places around the house, like the bathroom mirror or just above the doorknob, so that every time that they open the door or look in the mirror, they'll remember. Other people create something like a painting, a sculpture, or some other awesome project that reminds them of a time when God was there for them. The Israelites actually sometimes made altars that were like large rock pillars to remind themselves of important times when God had done a miracle for them.
I like those ideas. Well, I guess one lesson God has been teaching me is patience. I learned from Noah that I shouldn't just sit around while I'm waiting. I should ask God what He would want me to do. Maybe I could put a pink post-it note next to my electronic customizable variable hourglass sand timer that says, "What would God want me to do right now?" So that every time I set the timer, I'll remember to ask God for ideas of what to do.
I like that idea. One lesson that I've learned is that God always provides for us. Just like He provided for the Israelites in the desert, through this time of shortages, God has always provided for our needs so we wouldn't go hungry, thirsty, or even toilet paperless. Maybe I'll put a sticky note on the refrigerator with some manna and quail drawn on it, so that each time I go to get some food, I'll remember that all of the food that we have is a blessing from God.
Wow, this is kind of fun. But I kind of like your idea of making an awesome project to remember as well. I got it. Through this whole time, anytime I got busy or stressed, first of all, I would do the chicken dance. But then I would remember the story of Mary and Martha and how Jesus wanted Martha to slow down and to connect and recharge by spending time with him instead of always being on the go. I've been making more time to spend with Jesus, and it's really been giving me more energy. So maybe I'll create an electrical circuit attached to my alarm clock so that every morning when I turn off my alarm, the pushing of the button will complete the circuit, causing a light bulb to turn on. That way each morning I'll remember how spending time with Jesus will give me power and light for the rest of my day.
That's fancy. Sounds cool, but also complicated.
I'm going to write up my plans in my super duper project builder bullet journal, and quick, so I don't forget.
Friends, has God been there for you during this crazy season of distance learning? How have you seen him working in your lives and in your homes? What lessons have you learned? How have you grown? Once the school year ends and you start summer, it is so easy to just move on and not remember what has happened and the amazing experiences that you've had. I want to encourage you this week to do something to record and reflect on these last few months. Write about it in a journal. Talk about it with your friends or family members. Cover your home with post-it notes. Or create a project that reminds you of something that you've learned or how God has been there for you. Or consider letting us know what you've learned. Shoot us an email at ckoh@lla.org. That's ckoh@lla.org to let us know what you've learned from Grounded Stories or what God has done for you. We'd love to hear your stories and be part of your reflection as you wrap up this season. This episode featured the voices of yours truly, Clayton Coe, and my lovely wife, Lindsay. We once again roped in Ella Schrader as the voice of Little Linz, as well as her stuffy, Bowser. And special thanks to Luca Savino for doing the voice of Little Linz's older brother. You have a great, sinister laugh. Well, that's all, friends. Thanks for being our faithful listeners. If you've enjoyed Grounded Stories, consider sharing it with a friend who likes to listen to fun stories. Maybe by doing that, you can share a little laughter and spiritual connection with your friends, even throughout the summer. Grounded Stories is produced for the Southeastern California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists Office of Education. We hope that these stories have helped you as much as they've helped us to stay grounded in Jesus.